Stay tuned after the episode to hear our latest edition of And Then What. All right, Brendan, the other day I saw an Instagram post from a work acquaintance named Griffin Mims, and he'd had a big moment. He just climbed Mount Everest as part of his journey as a storyteller. He's taking photos up there, and he was reflecting about how he began. And he remembered being in a dorm room and seeing a film by Chris Burkhardt and Renan Ozturk and thinking, geez, I want to do that with my life. Like, that looks awesome. And I want to tell stories in wild places. And then he's like, how how does one do that? And like sort of becomes paralyzed by the whole thing. And then he has this moment, which he was shared in this Instagram post, of taking a step back and being like, well, there's two clear hurdles right out of the gate. One is I don't own a camera, and two is I don't know how to use a camera. And I actually have control over those hurdles. And that's how he started. Like, he didn't worry about like all the craziness that would go between being like, I want to do this and not knowing how to do it, and being like on top of Mount Everest taking photos for work. He just started with the basics. I think we get caught up in like the murky middle, or even at the end of the story, and we don't really look at the path that is just in front of us. We don't think about how the story would start. If you look at you today, you are a successful writer, a creative, an author of many books, a filmmaker, a beloved voice in the outdoor and running community. How did it start? Like, how did you begin that process? And was that even something you thought was possible? Was that something you were looking towards when it began?
Oh boy. Well, thanks for that introduction. I feel like you should just tell my dad that. Like, I'm a successful writer. It's great.
You are.
uh, in that I don't have to have a real job. That's success. Yeah. When you were telling that story about Griffin, I think of this one of my favorite quotes from Austin Kleon, the who wrote "Steal Like an Artist," is forget the noun, do the verb. And when I was younger, I wanted to be a writer because I thought that was like the coolest thing that you could do besides being a musician. Learning to type was way easier than learning to play the guitar, I guess, at that point. I didn't know what it meant, but I did know how to try, I guess. And so that's just kind of what I've been doing for 21 years now, I guess. Is trying and doing the verb, and in whatever way possible. Media has changed a lot since you and I both started this. At the beginning, it was mid 2000s, like 2004, 2005, I was trying to get published because I thought you had to ask people permission to write, which you did to an extent. You had to say, hey, Backpacker Magazine, I want to write this piece. Can you pay me to write it? So I think I tried to do that for several years before it actually gained some traction. But along the way, I saw you do the Dirtbag Diaries, which was not asking anyone for permission. It was just like, I'm just going to do these stories, read them into this microphone in this closet, and we'll see where it goes. And it went somewhere. And so that enabled me to understand that you don't have to ask somebody permission to do the thing you want to do. You can just do it. Doesn't mean it's going to succeed in any way, but you can do it. You can learn by doing and by trying. And so that's kind of what I did starting in like 2011. Started my own website and was like, I'm just going to write things that I think are funny and interesting. And I don't have to ask an editor if they think it has a chance of being published, or it doesn't need a reader service angle, or it doesn't have to be a listicle. It can just be some weird, funny thing. And gosh, I'm still doing that. I don't really have a business model. It's like throw stuff at the wall, hope some of it sticks. If it doesn't, try again next week.
Do you feel like it's gotten any easier to call yourself the noun, or are you still firmly in the verb? Like, do you think of yourself as a writer?
Yeah, it's easier because like people want to know what you do for a living when you meet them, like on an airplane or at a party or something.
You're
Like, what do
like,
you do? And you're like, oh, I kind of do a lot of stuff. Illustrating, do a little bit of filmmaking, I don't know. But I always approach things from an angle of words. So, yeah. And I think I've realized that like writer can mean so many different things. It can mean I do like technical writing for a tech company, or copywriting for a grocery store, or you can be Stephen King. If you tell somebody on an airplane, you're like, they say, what do you do for a living? You say, I'm a writer. They're like, oh, would I have read anything you've written? And no matter who you are, you should just say, no, no, you haven't. There's absolutely no way. And then they're like, come on, really? And you're like, yeah, yeah, I wrote, like I wrote 50 Shades of Grey. Did you read that? Like there's just almost no chance, it's just not as pervasive as like being on TV or something like that. So yeah, it's easier, I think. I mean, I don't think I think when I started out, it seemed like this title that was like very elevated. And now I'm just like, nah, man, it's just like you're just like a plumber or an electrician. You just use words instead of, wires or pipes. So like, if somebody's like, oh, you're a writer, wow. And I'd be like, really? Wow? No, it's no, no, dude. Yeah.
I'm just down under the sink here, putting some things together,
I mean,
doing it that way. I hear so often, like, well, how do you become this? Or how do you get to this? And they want to do something big with big, like whether it's like, I want to climb El Cap one day, or I want to, run 100 miles, whatever it is. And it's like, you have to start somewhere and you have to even kind of learn if you're going to like it, right? Like, because there's a big difference between I want to go do this thing and actually doing all the work to go do it and having it feel like fun and actually loving the whole thing. And I guess, like, on that level, when you look at it, do you think that that's just what powered you through is the love for it? Because when you are that person that's having to ask for permission, it's tricky because you're like, "How do I make ends meet here? How do I do this? Like, how does it all work?" In the beginning, you're working 2 jobs, right? And so, was love always enough to carry you through?
I don't know what it was. It was like the coolest thing I could imagine being was a writer, and the coolest thing I could imagine writing about was being in the mountains. As I was getting a journalism degree, it was like I realized you could go do fun things in the mountains and then write about them, and then ostensibly get paid for it. It didn't happen very quickly, nor was the money enough to be a real job. But like, I was like, well, that's pretty awesome. Like, I can't really imagine anything I'd rather do. It dips at times. Sometimes you're
Mhm.
like, oh, I gotta do something. I gotta write something, or I gotta create this thing this week. And you're like, I mean, I can't really get too down. I can't be like, oh, I'm sick of drawing these funny pie charts about ultra marathons. I'm like, really, dude? I mean, it's not like as if you're going into a diamond mine, like, like you can handle this. So yeah, I would say the love of it, but also the awareness that I know what a real job's like. I've had tons of real jobs. I could do them. I kind of wish I had to do have a real job for like one day a week, like demolition or something like that. I mentioned getting a real job to somebody I was running with a few weeks ago, and they were like, "What are you actually qualified to do?" And I was like, "Come on, man! Like, I don't know, marketing, creative work. Like, I can do a lot of stuff."
Maybe you should just sort of combine plumbing with, like, you could write, like, you could be like, "I'll fix your toilet and I'll write you a haiku." It'll be both.
Right. I
Like,
know.
maybe there's something there. It's like you could get that one day of work of, quote, unquote, "a real job,"
Yeah, I
but then
know.
yeah, I don't know, maybe there's something there.
But yeah, you do have to like think back. Like I started doing this because I love it, and like I'm glad of one thing is that I never like picked a sort of brand that was like very very narrow. Like they would tell you to do. Like a lot of people would say, if you want to be a writer and do your own thing, pick the smallest niche possible, and that's how you're gonna find your audience. And like that's good advice. But like I'm really glad I didn't make myself like a climbing blog in 2011 because I hardly climb anymore. And it's nice to be able to try other things and be like, now this all falls under the umbrella of adventure. And the definition of adventure keeps changing for me as I get older. Like, adventure is anything with an unknown outcome, and like that could be climbing a mountain. It could be going on an expedition. It could also be potty training a toddler or even just like taking my kid on a bike ride, around the neighborhood. Like, I don't know what's going to happen here. We have no idea. You do something that you're interested in that you can potentially have enthusiasm for. You learn something and then you report back. And that's just like that's storytelling to me, in the very simplest form.
You were one of the first contributors really at the Dirtbag Diaries. I really clearly remember our first phone call, back in the day of you being like, "Well, I got these ideas." And I was like, "Great, let's do it." And I think at that stage, you were very into riding your bike. I think you were starting to get really into climbing, and then you got really into climbing, but you have become, I would say, a runner. Like, that is really what you do these days, and not just running, but really long distances. And after having sampled the wonderful all-you-can-eat buffet of adventure sports, why was it this sport that has stuck with you so much? What about it just speaks to you?
Well, first, like my interest in climbing waned after I was in I was like witnessed a climbing accident, like a kid decked right next to me. Um,
Mhm,
and we spent 6 hours helping getting him off this ledge, and it was just kind of like, wow, this is what can actually happen when things go really wrong up here. And maybe that's not, maybe it's not that worth it for me anymore.
mhm.
Running just seems safer. If you're a climber, you probably know a lot of people who have died doing it. If you're a runner, there's not that many people who die doing it. It sucks, and you feel like you're gonna die a lot of times, but you're not. You're not really going to. I feel like it's sort of coincided with our addiction to smartphones, honestly, where it was like you can be reached at any time. At any time, you have this thing in your pocket that you can just destroy an hour, 2 hours of your life just scrolling through garbage, or interesting things, but mostly garbage and things that aren't going to make you.
I think the kids call it the slop these
Yeah,
days.
slop. Yeah, now it's definitely slop, right? But like it used to, even if it's human created stuff, it's like, and you sort of can feel empty at the end of it. And so now I just have rules when I run, and it's like I don't look at my phone if I have it with me unless I take a photo with it, which is what I need to do. Or if I'm on a trail where I actually don't know where I'm going, but I go without my phone, or I don't listen to podcasts, I don't listen to music, I don't do anything. I'm just in my own shit out there thinking. And so now I need that time to create. I need that time to solve problems and think up new stuff. And so it's a big part of my week as a creative. Like I just have to be like, all right, I'm going to be doing this for an hour and a half. I'm going to slog up this mountain, run down, and by the end of it, I'll have an idea, or I'll figure out what the seventh part of that 8 part thing is, or whatever it is. So to me, it's an escape. It's like the one time in my week that I cannot be touched by. Nobody can ask me anything. I'm not checking the 27 tabs I have open. I'm not looking at my inbox that has 500 emails in it. It's not vibrating. Like I'm not getting texts. I'm not, whatever. So it's the way to get away and actually hang on to that space that I use to think and create.
Do you think that it's, like, maybe the pace of running is something that's, like, harder to find? Like, I think about climbing, and it turns out it's pretty hard to think about other things while you're, like, clinging to a vertical wall by your fingertips, 5 feet above your gear. Like, it's pretty immersive, and there's not a lot else going on in your brain. I mean, certainly, like, while you're on a ledge belaying, there's moments, but, even mountain biking, you're just processing, processing, processing. Your brain is moving through the actual activity, and that's a form of presence. But there is something about running where you get to process thoughts versus like what the next step is. I don't know whether you see it that way. Is that something that you can't find in the other sports that running gives you? Is that it actually there's like the ability for your brain to work on other problems versus just what's right in front of you?
Yeah, it's like the flow state, but it's very low consequence flow state.
Hmm.
It's like being in the shower or driving, where you're like driving on a highway where you're like it's pretty open and you just have to remember to change lanes and stuff like that. But like you have that you're engaged but not enough to like really mess something up. And in climbing, I think yeah, you're definitely yeah, I love the complete escape, like not being able to think of anything but the next move and did you put a piece of gear in? Will that hold? Blah blah blah. Where are you at? But climbing is so it's actually when you think about how much time you actually spend climbing rocks from like the time that you're out there versus the time you're actually moving vertically up stone is so funny to me. It's like, well, yeah, we walked in, 30 minutes or an hour, hour and a half. Maybe it's an alpine route, it's even further. And then we like spent all this time getting our stuff, laid out and clipped on. And then one of us climbed up a pitch. And then, so you're like belaying, you're walking in, you're rappelling off. And like this fraction of time, you're actually climbing and engaged with the rock, like where it's very heightened consciousness is actually pretty low. And running, I can leave my house and just like, we're lucky we have a mountain, 2 miles at the end of the street here. And I just bust up that. And I'm like, I'm in a flow state for almost that entire time that I'm out. Once I've locked the door and start running, besides crossing a few streets, it's like I'm good. I get so it's really easy to access for me versus all those other sports. There's so little equipment and we say running is simple and it's like a total joke because there's all this stuff you can buy if you're doing a 100-mile ultra marathon and all this gear you need and all this food and calories and all that stuff. And it becomes very not simple. But like compared to like putting on these really uncomfortable plastic boots and then putting these like things on the bottom of your skis and then tromping uphill with trying to stay without sliding backwards so you get to the top and then turning around peeling the like things off your skis switching up your boots and then skiing down. It's like it's pretty chill. Just put on some shoes and go run.
How many ultra marathons have you run at this point?
I want to say like 13 or 14 official like races, but then I've done a bunch of like just self designed like ultra distance things that are like rim to rim to rim. I've done a couple times and I've just created a couple like 30 or 60-mile routes every once in a while just to do for fun.
Is more always more in the sense when it comes to running? Or is more always better, I guess I should say.
No, I do not like I if I run another 100-mile race in my life, that'll be a miracle. I just don't have fun after about 62 miles because it's like then I'm out all night.
Have you refined it? Is 62 like relate to some kilometer distance that I'm not aware of?
And it's
Is that
100K.
that's
Yeah.
100K.
Yeah.
You're
So
like
it's
you're like 100K, cool.
yeah.
Moment later, not cool.
No, no. I mean, probably I could get to like 70, 75, but like once you're like, and you're gonna see the sun come up another time, it's just like, fuck this. Because I'm just so slow. And maybe I'd be better now. I guess I haven't done it in several years, but like, it's just not that fun. And like, it's all arbitrary anyway. It's like, why is it 100
Yeah.
miles? So and it just destroys you. And like now I'm not in a position where I'm like, I want to spend these long weekends like doing these huge long runs when I could be at home, like listening to my kid mispronounce words or whatever.
I've done a few what would be quote unquote ultras, which I find to be funny. It's like any distance greater than 26 miles. So I've done that, I don't know, more than a dozen times, I would say. But anytime, it's like so funny. I feel like as someone who runs marathons, I kind of hit mile 22 and I say to myself every time, this is stupid. This is like, I don't like running. This is stupid. Like I never even get curious about running 100 miles. Like maybe in the beginning when I first heard about it 25 years ago, but now I'm like, no way. I maybe I just don't love it enough on any level, but I think as the marathoner, you're like, I understand you run slower. I understand you hike more of it, but I'm still just sort of in awe of it.
I think there's this curiosity for me. It was like, who are these people who do this? Because they're not all like gifted athletes. It's just like you step up to the starting line in one of these races and you're like, every single person here is the weirdest person at their office, or their family, gatherings. They're like, oh yeah, that's Jeff. He's the ultra runner. He does 100-mile races. And you're like, God, what a maniac. But I think you just adjust to like the reality.
So we just got back from hanging out on the beach in California, and it was like classic Northern California beach weather where it was a mix of fog, sun, and wind. And though we were really good at putting sunscreen on in the morning, sometimes we slipped in the afternoon, and it was like, why would I ever get burned? It's gray out. And then we got torched. Fortunately, we had Tern's Mayday, designed for when you've been exposed to the element. It has 3-time Tern's special marine-derived complex that speeds up skin regeneration and healing, and it helps minimize peeling and replenishes moisture. I like Tern's philosophy of maximum results, minimum routine. Having a go-to product that's good for my skin is awesome. After sun should not be an afterthought, especially at this time of year when we're all out doing the things we love and sometimes getting burned. Use the code DIRTBAG to get 25% off your first order at turns.com. We'll put a link in the show notes and you can try Turns for yourself. The Diaries is supported by Oboes. So, Oboes set up camp in the legendary hiking and backpacking hub of Bozeman, Montana. There are literally millions of acres of peaks, valleys, rivers, and prairies, and even the greater Yellowstone ecosystem in their backyard. And Oboes basically turned it into a natural R&D lab. The updated Katabatic footwear collection is perfect for fast packing or quick day hikes. It's lighter and built with more environmentally friendly materials, and whether you're crossing creeks or trying to escape a thunderstorm while you're out on the trail, the waterproof style includes Gore-Tex Invisible Fit technology for enhanced breathability. I've been rocking the Katabatic LT out in the woods, and I love the lightness, but also the stability, which is kind of important for me when I'm carrying a pack. It makes me feel like I'm moving quickly on the trail. To find your next pair of footwear, check out obosfootwear.com/love hiking. Oboes Footwear, love hiking. Support for the Diaries comes from our good friends at Kuat Racks. Are you looking to level up your truck bed setup for the summer season? The Ibex from Kuat Racks is the perfect companion. This fully modular, all-metal bed rack system is built to handle every season and sport. So whether you're hauling bikes, kayaks, rooftop tents, or just gearing up for the summer road trip, the Ibex adapts with adjustable height options and a growing lineup of accessories. And now, new for 2025, the Ibex Panel Kit. It's designed to partially or fully enclose the Ibex. The panel kit keeps your gear secure and dry from the elements, and the lockable gull-wing doors offer a quick, easy access to the truck bed when you need it. Currently available for 2016 to 2025 Toyota Tacoma short beds, with more fitments on the way. Find out more at kuat.com. I think a lot of people ask me, like, how do you do what you love? Like, I don't always have the answer to that. I'm like, I think you gotta just try. But I feel like you're a good person to ask. I'm curious to know from your perspective, how do you do what you love?
I think maybe the best answer I could think of is like it's like this we all we talk nowadays about our attention is the product. And I think most of us are unaware of where we direct our attention and how much we're losing on a daily basis or a weekly basis. And like if you have the screen time app on your phone and you look at it, it's appalling. You're like, what? I looked at my phone for 2.5 hours on Tuesday. What was I even doing? And like, well, 2.5 hours, I probably could have run 10 miles in that amount of time. And I love running. And like, do I love scrolling through Instagram? My phone says I do, you know? So like, how do you actually prioritize the things you love? And I think things that, we're losing time in like these micro doses of like pick up your phone when you're in line at the coffee shop, pick up your phone while you're waiting for your coffee to brew, pick up, so you're losing just a few minutes there. But somebody just sent me, a friend of theirs has issued themselves this challenge, and this is going on like almost 4 years, I believe, where they do a creative thing for 20 minutes every day and then text a friend about it, the same friend. I was like, wow, that is actually amazing. Like you have to generate something. Like that's all you have to do. That's 20 minutes. And it doesn't sound like much, but that is more than probably 99.9% of people.
Yeah.
So when you're like, how do you do what you love? To me, if you want to be a writer or if you want to be a musician or a painter or filmmaker or photographer, it's like you have to subtract, you have to take that time away from something else. And I think of in my house, we have very little time for streaming shows or anything. It was like, I think we've watched one show in the last 2 years, and people are always like, hey, have you seen this show? And I'm like, no. And they're like, I didn't even say the title of it. And I'm like, I just haven't seen it. And I think we're able to plow that time into like gardening or building crappy furniture in my case, or like bike maintenance or writing things or drawing or whatever it is. And like we have no qualms nowadays if you're a person who works a regular job and you're like in your head you want to be a writer, you don't care about, you're like, yeah, it's totally fine to go spend an hour and a half every night watching Netflix. But if you were to say to your partner or your roommate or whatever, like, yeah, I'm going to go write for an hour and a half, it's a much bigger deal for people, like to take that time. It feels selfish. It feels like out of the ordinary. And it feels like you're actually risking something too, versus like, I'll just turn this on and watch it is so much less of a commitment or a risk. And I think that's where I have been able to sort of succeed in some way, I guess, is making myself do the thing that I know I want to do. I still spend way too much time on my phone, but and watching NBA highlight videos on YouTube for whatever reason. But like I don't know. I don't know how to tell people how to do it. It's like it's a very simple answer. It's like, well, what do you want to do? Do it. Like, okay, go spend some time on it. Like at the end of the week, wow, you did 20 minutes of creative work every day. That's 140 minutes you did. That's over 2 hours. It's almost 2.5 hours of it. I'm not one of those people who's like, you need to build better habits. I'm like, well, just do the thing you said you wanted to do, man. Like, did you die doing what you loved, watching Netflix, or did you like plow your energy into painting or photography or whatever it is?
It's interesting. One of the things I have gotten better about in my life is just being like some is better than none. Because I feel like that, especially just because of like my life when I was younger was really, I had to think more about making sure I didn't hurt myself by overdoing it, right? That like on that level. And so I think as my life has become more diverse in terms of the pursuits of what I do, uh, I sort of had an idea of what a run is, or what a good even climbing gym session was, or what was a quality mountain bike ride, right? And I had that baked in, and there were quantitative parameters put around that. And at some stage, I just was like, 25 minutes at the bouldering gym, like they opened a bouldering gym like a block away from our office, right? And it's amazing. And at first, I was like, oh, I am gonna have to worry about getting tendonitis. I'm gonna be in there all the time. And then I found myself like, I'm really not going that much. And it's like right there. And it was because like the truth of it was that I had 35 minutes to go in there, 40 minutes. And somehow I said to myself, that's not enough. You got to set aside an hour and a half. And it turned out that was kind of a trickier thing to increase the number of hour and a halves there were in my week. But I took a step back and I realized, like, I'm way more psyched if I go run 1.8 miles than if I don't run 1.8. If I run 0, I'm happier if I run something, and I'm happier if I go climbing for 30 minutes than I am if I went 0, right? And that was a huge gap for me in terms of crossing that mental barrier of what I used to consider quality versus what I consider quality now. I mean, you could sort of look at that and say, well, you're just really lowering your standards to make yourself happy. And you're like, well, maybe there's something in there. But the truth of it is like, I'm actually doing the thing. I'm actually practicing this. And I'm in there. And if you zoom back out of like the number of hours in the year that I've committed towards this thing, like where I'm at, I'm so much better off than if I had put these sort of quantitative analysis on these activities and said what's quality and what's not based upon that. The truth is I'm doing really cool things when I actually do have a full day. And it's because I grabbed all those 20 minutes that I could and I turned them into something that through the course of the year kind of added up in some bizarre way. Now, am I like the best? By no means am I that, but I am a much better version of myself than I would be if I hadn't done that, and that's been illuminating to me.
I think of like, as far as writing goes, we always look to these old school writers who are like Hemingway, Murakami, who else, they're like, get up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. and write for 8 hours and don't leave the office until you've written however many words or whatever. It's like, okay, dude, that probably worked for you back in the day when you like, okay, you're also to the very few people who made a living writing just books. But like that's not what most of us get. You don't get a like do your writer's retreat at like some shed in the woods that you built and like get this focused month to put into your book. It's like you get scraps, man. What can you do with the scraps and what can you do at that time? And can you keep kicking the ball forward every day for several months, even if it's just a sentence or two, and actually get it done and still do the thing. And I think that's way more heroic to me than somebody who was able to shut the door for 8 hours every morning and probably never change a diaper or like did they wash dishes? Did they cook? Like Hemingway ever clean a toilet? I don't know. Probably not. Like he's probably in a very misogynistic way able to focus on his art. And like most of us have full lives and we're unable to do that sort of thing. So I also like it's funny, like nobody's paying me to like run fast, like I don't need to be the best. I just need to survive the race and like live to tell about it. So yeah, if I don't have a quote unquote great workout today, that's fine. If I ran my kid in the stroller to daycare and then ran the stroller to the grocery store to get groceries and then ran home, that's good. That's 3.6 miles that I'm clocking. So that counts.
I feel like that's almost like the theme for this whole conversation is you get scraps, make the most of them. I was hoping you could kind of close this out by reading this poem you wrote this winter. That idea of being like, take what you can get, even if it's small, and do it regularly, and it becomes something big, it turns out, if you keep doing it. Whenever you published that, I just saw what you were doing with your world, where you were just getting to do exactly what you wanted, and I loved it. That's why I want to have you on the show. So I was hoping you could just finish with this poem for us.
Yeah, so it's called Reminder to Touch Grass. The snow felt like it was just going to keep coming, like the news has been, but at least you can ski on snow. I pushed our shovel down the middle of the sidewalk, clearing a path, heaving piles of snow onto the parking strip. I mean, somebody was going to have to do it. I usually shovel the walk of the house next door too, and the other house, the other next door, because I might as well while I'm out there. Nathan lives 4 doors down, on the corner, and we don't have each other's phone numbers, but we wave when within waving distance, and stop and chat when within chatting distance. This afternoon, he was shoveling too, working his way toward me, clearing the walks of the 2 houses next to his. We met in the middle, leaning on our shovels, talking about many things, none of which were national news, or would even be considered newsworthy for anyone who didn't live on our block. They say to remember to touch grass every once in a while, which is what we say now to remind us to do 3-dimensional things. Real-world things. The things we do when we set down our glowing rectangles. Sometimes you get a few weeks that feel like a hell of a few weeks, and you do what you can do, and maybe it doesn't feel like enough. But it's what you can do now, and your wheels are still spinning, and nothing you click on or scroll to seems to be the answer. But you remember that they said to remember to touch grass. You shovel some snow, you sweep the floor, you go for a run, you look up at some trees, you bake a cake, you talk to someone without using a keyboard to do it. You water some plants, you chop wood and carry water, as they say, and get some dirt under your fingernails, or feel the wind on your face, and make a tiny little scratch on the world that says, I'm still here, for right now. I lost track of time talking to Nathan, finally pulled my gloved hand off my shovel handle, nudged my jacket cuff up to check my watch, and said, oh shit, I gotta go. I said a hasty goodbye and jogged down the sidewalk I'd half shoveled, telling myself I'd finish it later, after I picked up my kid from daycare. And tomorrow, more news would come, and more snow would fall, and I could decide what to shovel.
Thanks, Brendan, for coming on the show. You can find more of Brendan's writing, graphs, and wisdom at semirad.com or on his Substack by the same name. I highly recommend subscribing to his Friday Inspiration newsletter as well. It is one of the very, very few non-essential emails that I open every week, and I am continually delighted by its contents. Our stories come from friends of friends, and from you, our community. If you have a compelling idea for a guest or a story lead, please give us a shout. You can email us at editor@ducttapethenbeer.com. Shout out to the folks who have recently become Diaries Plus members and to those that continue supporting. It is the difference between the show being here and not. Music today is from Frozen Mesa and Brendan O'Connell. The tracks are courtesy of the artists or Track Club. Jacob Bain and Nis Koto composed our theme song. You can find the artists at our website, dirtbagdiaries.com. This episode was produced by Marco Seiler Gonzalez with additional production help from me. Becca Cahal is our executive producer. I'm Skylar Perwins, filling in on credits while Fitz is out enjoying Europe. You've been listening to the Dirtbag Diaries. Thanks for tuning in.
Welcome to And Then What, the segment where we break down the headlines and figure out what the hell's happened since then. Through the years, we've covered Minnesota's Boundary Waters. It's an incredible place, and chances are you've even been there because it is our country's most visited wilderness area. For the better part of 2 decades, there's been an ongoing battle over copper mining, one of the most aggressive, hard to clean up, and polluting types of mining out there, at the very top of the headwaters. Through it all, the campaign to save the Boundary Waters has been hard at work gathering support, doing work at the local, state, and national level. And in 2023, it looked like they'd managed to secure a lasting victory by building a coalition and outpouring of support that spanned political parties. And then, well, let's find out what happened. And it's not all bad. Today we talk with Ingrid Lyons, Executive Director of Save the Boundary Waters. Ingrid, you all have had a very busy spring, but first I want to take a moment and ask, how do you describe the Boundary Waters and this project you've been working on for so many years to the people who haven't been there?
The Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness is one of the most unique parcels of public land, I believe, in our entire country. The amount of water is truly mind-boggling. It is deeply interconnected freshwater. It's not often that you get to traverse an inland landscape by boat. When you include everything, all the landscape that sort of makes up canoe country, we're talking about the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, but we're also talking about Canada's Quetico Provincial Park, as well as Voyageurs National Park. And when you put it all together, it's about 4.4 million acres of this extremely unique type of ecosystem. So, I mean, I think it's really hard to wrap your mind around it. And so we're always encouraging of people to, get in a canoe and join us and experience the place firsthand. The project that Save the Boundary Waters has been working on for about a decade is really the effort to prevent the development of copper mining in the watershed of this incredibly unique, broad ecosystem. This is not the place for America's most toxic industry, which the EPA has found to be hard rock mining, which copper mining is. This copper mine is proposed on the doorstep of the Boundary Waters, which is the headwaters of essentially this entire watershed in the 4.4 million acre freshwater ecosystem. Even just hearing about it, people immediately understand why this is the wrong place for this type of highly destructive mining.
The battle over this copper mine has gone back and forth and back and forth. At the end of the Biden administration, it seemed like maybe we were past this. Maybe this was kind of like a done deal. What happened next?
So we were really thrilled when in 2023, Interior Secretary Deb Haaland put in place a 20-year ban in the watershed of the Boundary Waters. We were sort of bracing ourselves for a second Trump administration. And it's not because this issue is meaningfully partisan. It has become a political football at the administrative level. But when you look at polling, this issue polls really well, and it polls across partisan divides. I mean, I think that's a pretty typical story these days, that outdoor recreation and public lands and access to public lands poll really favorably across the country. In Minnesota, 70% of Minnesotans want to see this landscape permanently protected. The Obama administration had started a study and a process for withdrawing these lands. The Trump administration stopped that process. Biden administration got it back going. And so we're expecting and sort of gearing up for another big fight. And we got it.
How did you guys respond, and what happened right out of the gate when the new administration came in?
We went in eyes wide open, expecting full well that the steps of progress that we've made, especially in the Biden administration, would be overturned. It was also in Project 2025. If you took the entirety of the Project 2025 sort of blueprint document and you Command F'd for Minnesota, the only mention of our state was about the revocation of this 20-year mining ban and opening the Superior National Forest in northeastern Minnesota up to copper mining. And so we've tracked about 20 relevant executive orders pertaining to national security, need for boosting of domestic mineral supply, the sort of like creation of this very complex network of sort of administrative directives aimed at opening America's public lands to destructive mining. No matter the administration, we meet with folks in the Forest Service, the Department of Interior, the Department of Agriculture, the relevant folks who are so critical in the decision making, and the folks who are the ones really tossing this football back and forth. And so we have been able to meet with the administration on a few occasions. And that's something that I think is really important to do, even if you kind of know you're going into a meeting with a brick wall.
Right out of the gate, you guys had a win, right? The rescinding of the mining ban was included actually in the budget bill, and you were able to remove that out. Like almost out of the gate, working with a House of Representatives that is Republican controlled, you were able to get that out of the House bill. And then what happened?
The reconciliation fight was a big one. The coalition really came together. Advocates really came together to use the process in our favor. I mean, the Boundary Waters language in reconciliation didn't belong there. And that was always clear. There's a lot of stuff that, maybe doesn't belong in reconciliation that managed to stay in. And so it was really gratifying to have champions like Senator Tina Smith and Representative Betty McCollum really standing strong for the Boundary Waters. That was a really wonderful development. Actually, I was in Washington, D.C. when the House reconciliation bill had the Boundary Waters language removed, and was there the day that the Senate language came out and the Boundary Waters wasn't in it. And I was actually at the airport because I was about to fly home after, 3 days of advocacy in Washington. One of my team members texts me and she says, "Have you seen this tweet?" Like, what tweet? And lo and behold, the Secretary for the Department of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, had tweeted the very same day that Boundary Waters was officially out of reconciliation, that she and Interior Secretary Doug Burgum were beginning the process to overturn the 20-year ban on copper mining in the Superior National Forest. In the same breath, they also said that they had completed a process that clearly indicated that there was no need for the mineral withdrawal in the first place, including robust public input that pointed in that direction, which is all very confusing to us because, we've had no awareness of any process relating to undoing this mineral withdrawal. There's been no public comment meetings, no official notices in the Federal Register.
So what I almost hear you politely saying there is that they were just actually like lying.
Yeah.
Like that they were sort of saying we'd done all this work and that this has all happened. And really they didn't like the outcome of what happened in the democratic institutions of Congress. And then they sort of made up a story where they're like, we're going to do this because we've done all this research, had all this public input, and it all says to remove this, when in fact none of that's happened. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's totally right. This is not how we create policy about public lands. One tweet, one inaccurate, callous tweet is how we determine the future of America's most visited wilderness. I think it's a really abhorrent precedent.
The Boundary Waters is this economic driver for the communities up there too. And so it's not just, right, like, I guess in your mind, like, this doesn't just seem like a tweet about public land management, but it's about people's livelihoods, their heritage. Do you feel like your community's waking up? Because obviously this is something that a lot of people in northern Minnesota worked really hard to protect and care for.
One of the things that really keeps me, I think, grounded and energized in this work is that this community is awake the vast majority of the time. You know, they are really tuned in. They are there. They are ready to go. They are supportive. And I think, yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty. They're riding this roller coaster too, but it's, you know, it's where they live. It's the outfitter on Main Street whose clients are canceling trips because, you know, they're not sure what's going on and what the sentiment is up there. So there's a deep level of uncertainty. And it's the best thing about my job is seeing people so motivated and so passionate about protecting this place.
What can we do to support you? Like, are there ways we can help sort of you push back against this?
Something that I hear in Washington fairly often that frustrates me is this is a local issue.
Mm-hmm.
Representatives and senators say that to me all the time. This is a local issue. We don't want to get involved. And so what folks can do is make sure that their elected officials know that you care about the Boundary Waters. Even if you've never been and on principle you want to protect the Boundary Waters, it's really important to ensure that people understand that this is an issue that affects us all and also has really powerful potential to set precedent for other really iconic American landscapes or even less iconic American landscapes. I mean, I think to your point, this is America's most visited wilderness, but it's also obscure to a lot of people. But at the end of the day, it's about a concept, right? It's about protecting the natural spaces. It's about protecting freshwater. I think people can help in a lot of different ways, but really just making it known that people from across the country want to see this place protected is enormously helpful to us.
So what actionable steps can you take? First off, there's a high likelihood that after the administration's defeat, they will attempt to put the mining in the Boundary Waters back on the table through a bill in Congress. And as we just saw in the public land sell-off battle, we've seen that public input in Congress matters. In the meantime, let's help this campaign keep growing on a national level. Follow Save the Boundary Waters on social, sign up for their newsletters, and consider making a donation. We're posting these pieces on our website, dirtbagdiaries.com, in case you want to share. And then what? Thanks to Diaries Plus members for making this reporting possible. Links are on our website and in the recent show notes. Thank you for caring about public lands.